Welcome to Wine Soundtrack USA. Listen to the passion with which producers narrate their winery and their world in 30 answers. Discover their stories, personalities, and passions.
Hello, friends and listeners of Wine Soundtrack. This is Allison Levine, and today I am in Sonoma with none other than Scott Peterson of Winecraft. Scott, welcome, and tell us about Winecraft and what that is and what that encompasses.
Well, hello. Thanks for including me. Winecraft is an overall umbrella company of mine where I make and consult wines. The wines that I make for myself and nakedwines.com are Rox, retro, obsessive, and extractive. I had to come up with that name in October.
So ROX.
ROX. I also have a project in Argentina, Mendoza, Argentina, that's called Rox of the Andes. Rumpus Cellars, which is my Sonoma Coast brand that I moved to the northern interior. It's kind of my entry level. And in my flagship brand, S.P. Drummer. I always thought the name Drummer was kind of cool because I was a drummer boy in the Williamsburg Fife and Drum Corps. And Scott Peterson's kind of a blasé name. So those are my four brands with Naked Wines.
Fantastic. So you said you're based in Sonoma. You're obviously making wine in Sonoma and Argentina. And I'm curious, how many cases do you produce? And are you sourcing fruit? Do you own fruit? Tell us a little bit about that. And what grapes are you working with?
Thank goodness I don't own any vineyards. I learned that a long time ago. But I probably control about 600 acres, most of that in Sonoma County for my Rox program. Favorite variety is probably Syrah. I make a really cool blend called Rox All Blacks. It's based on Syrah, Petite Sirah, Zinfandel, Alicante Boucher. I control those vineyards. I make a bunch of Chardonnays from different appellations, Russian River, Sonoma Coast. And then S.P. Drummer is a signature wine that is essentially appellated from the Petaluma Gap. I do a small amount of Cabernet from Knights Valley as well. But the idea is to control as much as possible, dictate the style that I want. What is my style? You know, I'm kind of a big guy, so I like big wines, unctuous wines. I like wines that over-deliver, and wines that simply taste like more.
Well, so you've been in the wine industry a very long time, but if you can remember way back when, what is your first memory relevant to wine?
First memory, I grew up in an Italian family, so my mother, father drank wine every night. I was allowed a little bit with ginger ale, kind of as a kid. And it was basically around the dinner table. My uncle tried making wine from California grapes that really didn't turn out too well. I helped him much later. But it was always around the house. It wasn't really reveled as something special or expensive by any means. That came a little bit later, but always been around it.
And so when it came a little bit later, is there one memorable wine? I'm sure there have been many, but is there one sort of that stands out that was an aha moment for a myriad of reasons? I mean, you tell me the wine and why it stood out to you.
Yeah, actually I have two.
Okay.
When I resigned from Kendall Jackson many moons ago, I guess I was in 98, and decided at a very tender age to start my own consulting business and go to Argentina. My father thought I was crazy. But the characters, Jed Steele and the people that I had worked for at the time at KJ, took me out to this fabulous lunch at Mustard's Grill in Napa Valley. And that's where I was first introduced to Cordon Charlemagne, which is still my signature Chardonnay style, and the best champagne I've ever had in my life. I've only had it a couple times since, was Salon. So those were two marquee wines that were just on a plateau above and beyond, and then kind of been chasing that style ever since.
Chasing and chasing and chasing. So if we were to come to your home, what sort of wines would we find in there? I mean, I mean, clearly if your pinnacles are Salon Champagne and Chardonnay, do we find a lot of those in your cellar, or what else would we find?
Well, if it's a hot day, we go right to the fridge, and I always have a couple bottles of champagne, non-vintage, maybe some sparkling wine from Cali, and then we'd probably move into crispy, non-New Zealand style Sauvignon Blancs. And then, of course, in this cellar, I always have a cache of some kick-ass Chardonnays, Pinot Noirs, et cetera, et cetera. I'm a strong aficionado of the wines of the Rhone Valley. I was just there last summer. It's kind of my style. It's big, unctuous, ripe. etc.
So you have a big smattering of domestic and international wines from all over, and grapes.
Allison, if we had to hold up in my house for 60 days, we'd be definitely taken care of. I've got it all.
It's good to know. And I'm surprised you didn't drink it all during COVID.
I did bust some, though, that's for sure.
So is there a wine that you opened up recently, maybe last night or in the last week, that just drank incredibly? And what was it?
Yeah, Saturday, Cinco May, 2018 Chardonnay Pop. Definitely my signature wine for a Grenache-based wine. And I had it with lamb, actually, which was killer.
A win-win on all levels there. So you're working with a ton of different grapes, and you've expressed sort of your love for, Rhone grapes, Chardonnay, Cabernet. Oh, you're an equal opportunist for all these grapes. So do you think there's a such thing as a perfect variety?
No, and I'm kind of a fanatic to blend, or I call myself a blending fanatic, because I believe the summation of different blocks, of different quartels of the same variety often is much superior, and certainly blends based on different varieties together. When I'm blending, you kind of close your eyes and you go into a blending session knowing exactly what you want, and then it's, can you make it happen? As was told to me a long time ago, go with your first intuition, because you start to second guess and you start to play with the blends. Oftentimes you end up diluting things, and it just gets complicated.
So you make a lot of wine, and you're making a lot of blends, and you're saying that there's no perfect variety, which makes perfect sense. I used perfect twice there, with no intention there. But I'm curious about what about perfect scores? Or in general, what's your opinion on critics and scores? Are you aspiring to get that perfect score, or do they not play a part?
God, that's a loaded question. It's like a critic for the ballet, for the theater, etc. First of all, they probably have never made a drop of wine. They're not classically trained. When I send out for scores, I do the shotgun approach, and I'll send it broadly to a bunch of different reviewers. Hopefully something hits and sticks. But I'm making wine for consumers. I want people to enjoy those wines. I want to bring the family together. I want them to enjoy them often. So whether it's a Pinnacle 96, 98, who really cares?
Well, that's fair. I mean, you submit them. If you get them, great, right? You stopped me on that. I was like... So, for you as a wine drinker, you've said you like big and unctuous wines. In a quick answer, red, white, or rosé?
Red and white. I'm not basically a rosé fan. Rosé is kind of like bisexuality. It's either to the left or to the right. I mean, go with one side. Except if it's champagne.
So if I say you had to pick between still and sparkling?
To drink, probably sparkling. To make, still.
So with such a variety of wines, and you just said the other night that you had the lamb with the Chardonnay-Pop, how do you approach food and wine pairing? I mean, that was a great pairing that you had the other night, and it obviously made both the dish and the wine shine. Do you aspire to that every time you're cooking a meal and opening a bottle of wine, and do you follow any rules or any rules you can share?
I usually pick the wine first and then decide what I want to eat. Basic the white and white meats and red meats kind of follows in line, unless it's Pinot Noir, which goes with everything. Sparkling wine goes with everything, before the meal, after the meal, during the meal.
Breakfast?
Breakfast and eggs. Basically it's more of a textural thing. If it's a big, rich dish, it can take a big, rich wine. Or you might want to have a wine that'll cut some of that fat, some of the grassa, etc. But again, I usually concentrate on the wine and then decide what I want to eat.
So for somebody who hasn't had the pleasure to try any of your wines, what do you think they're missing out on?
Oh, man. Wait till we meet. I would say my style, is more towards the mid-palate texture, to the textural aspect. I pay a lot of attention to that, to the mouthfeel. What sensory characteristics does the wine give? So my wines tend to be bigger in style, both aromatically and both on the palate, whether it's Sauvignon Blanc, whether it's definitely Chardonnay. I make a classic Chardonnay that's barrel fermented, 100% ML. It's a classic California. I think we go through styles up and down, and we try to do things differently to be different. But the true winners, for lack of a better word, in my book are the classic French varieties, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Cabernet, and Syrah. Those are my benchmarks.
So, we know that you're never supposed to ask a winemaker their favorite wine because it's like picking their favorite child, and you make a lot of different wines and have different labels. But if space aliens were to land on your property right now, which of your wines from all the wines you make would you want to welcome them with?
Oh, I'd bring a boatload of Chardonnay. It's just I make about 5 of them. I make a.
They get 5 bottles.
Well, yeah. I mean, we want to divide and conquer, right? We want to appease these guys. But I like the big Cabernets too, because Cabernets are very much a food wine. But if aliens were to come down, load them up with Chardonnay.
Any particular one?
S.P. Drummer and Rox.
So 2.
Actually, there's 3 Rox Chardonnays.
Well, you've been working in the wine business for how long? How many vintages?
Well, if you saw me, you would say, wow, like maybe 8. But I think it's a little bit more than that. I've been on my own for 20 years. I went to Argentina after resigning from KJ, and prior to that, Chateau Ste. Michelle. I ran the California properties. This was my 33rd vintage in Cali and my 8th vintage in South America. So that's 42.
Okay. So you've spent a lot of time in the vineyards, and you have witnessed many, many vintages, and you've seen them on 2 hemispheres, which is actually pretty cool. So I'm wondering, how do you look at vintage variation? And between the 2 hemispheres, do you see, not between the 2 hemispheres, but do you see more commonality from vintage to vintage here versus in South America? Do you see more variation? What have you noticed over your decades worth of working with different grapes?
That's very interesting question, Allison, because where I produce wines in Argentina and Chile are between the 33rd and the 37th parallel, maybe 38th parallel, whether it be south or north. Continentally, or Argentina is a continental climate, so it's more like eastern Washington, etc. Chile is a mirror image of California. So, traditionally, I thought California had kind of an easier time because a lot of vintages were essentially perfect and the same. Until about 5 years ago, until we got the fires and all the shenanigans, etc.
Fires, droughts, now rainstorms.
Yeah, and in 32 years, it's never been more difficult. It should be getting easier. But I think Argentina is very different, than California, because they get their precipitation, or the bulk of it, in their summer months, whereas California is very dry during the summer. Again, it used to be very easy making wine in California, and I'm into easy. But it's a challenge both ways. Just no more fires, please.
So are there any sort of signs or omens you look for that are going to help you determine what a vintage will be?
Yes, cane growth. So cane growth is directly related to the amount of moisture in the springtime, whether it be in the north or the south. Are the canes shorter than normal? Are they longer than normal? That will be indicative of the crop set, the balance of the crop. Really, I look for about a meter to 1.2 of cane growth, and I want a perfect balance. I want the vines to look like a garden. That manipulation starts early in the vintage year. In the north, it starts, say, in May and June, and then we'll make other passes in July and August. But harvest time should be kind of an easy time to decide when to pick, because it should be homogeneous, it should taste really good, it shouldn't be overripe, and it should have this kind of, and I did it last week in Argentina, I like almost this crunchiness in the berries, so what we call crocante in Spanish. and just keep walking it. Walk and talk and just be attuned.
So when you're walking through those vineyards and talking, are you talking to yourself or are you talking to your vines?
Talking to the angels, man. I'm talking to the angels, yeah.
Who are controlling the vines.
More or less, everything.
In all the years that you've been making wine, have you established any sort of rituals that you do at the start of harvest or during harvest?
Get some sleep, wake up early.
And you only do that during harvest?
Basically. Rituals, that's kind of neat because you always, I go into the vineyard I like Pearl Jam a lot, so I'll go into the vineyard kind of blasting music and you're all amped up and you're excited and we start to sample maybe 3 weeks before we decide to pick. And realize that you're making 20-ton decisions on a sample that's probably weighing about 1.5 pounds or 2 pounds. So it's walking many passes. It's looking at the vines. It's looking at the fruit. It's looking at the fruit zone. Are there any yellow leaves that are dying off? Are the vines starting to putter out? Mm-hmm. And also working with the vineyard managers. The vineyard managers that I work with have all been growing fruit for a generation or 2 or 3.
I'm not sure if I would call that any sort of rituals, although I guess walking the vineyard is the ritual. But I hope you're working with the growers all the time, regardless.
Yeah. Even they sometimes will say that I'm not, but absolutely. Yeah.
So when you were a little boy, you've worked in the wine industry a long time, and wine has been your life, so I don't know if you can go back before then, but what did you want to be when you grew up? Did you always know you wanted to be a winemaker?
No, I think I wanted to do something in the sea. I didn't really realize I wanted to be a winemaker until I made that migration from the East Coast to the West Coast and started to work in restaurants. My dad was a professor and a scientist. But no, when I was a little kid, I think I wanted to travel and meet cool people.
And as a winemaker, you get to travel
and meet cool people.
So you're living your dream.
Absolutely.
So when you're not working, not traveling, and living the dream, what do you do in your free time?
In the winter months, I ski. Love to ski. Summer months, the ocean, etc. Getting exercise 5-6 days a week. Like to swim. I swim a bunch in the summertime. And travel and meet cool people.
So you mentioned before that you had gotten a little advice when it came to making wine, and I'm wondering if there is another piece of advice that has stuck with you in how you live your life or approach your work. And if so, what is it and who gave it to you?
Another loaded question, Allison. There's this simple saying of live every day like it's your last, because one day it will be. Don't take advantage of what you have. I think my father told me that. I don't know, a little short on words.
Oh, well, I think you gave me 2. And if you could give advice to our listeners, what kind of advice would you give to them about wine?
Have an open mind. Learn as much or as little as you'd like. Trust your first intuitions. And wine to me is something that you can always learn. I mean, I've got 42 vintages, 43 vintages. I have a degree in it. I make, probably about 40 different wines, and I'm always learning something. There's something to learn. There's something to expand upon. You never will master it, which is cool. I hope I never reach a plateau of making a certain type of wine. It's just ongoing.
Yeah, it's if you always want to constantly be learning, keep an open mind.
Absolutely.
So when you look back at your illustrious career and 40-some-odd harvests, what would you say is one of your proudest achievements to date?
To date, because it's still in the future.
That's right. You have a whole life ahead of you.
Yeah, it's still in the future.
Even though you're living each day as if it's your last.
Turn it up a notch. Let's see. Proud accomplishments. Again, I'm making wine for the consumers. I've been very, very fortunate to be a part of some programs that were very successful that accelerated. I was hired on as the founding member of Textbook Wines, probably about 15 years ago that has been an international and a national success that my partner just sold 3 years ago. I've got 4 other consulting clients that are small and I think kind of family run, which is cool, and they're very prideful, going through the 3-tier system. I like that, and I like the fact that, I think anybody can do a couple hundred cases of something stellar, but can you add another 0 and another 0 and bring volume with quality remaining the same, I think is a gift, basically. Can you do something that's 5,000, 8,000 cases that tastes like it's 200 cases? Something that people think that are special. And, it's a broad base. Again, I'm making wine for consumers and people to enjoy. This is not food, shelter, and housing. Wine is a luxury product. It's meant to be enjoyed with friends and family.
Well, speaking of that, if you were sitting at a table like we are now, and there's an empty seat at that table, and we've got your wines on the table, who from any walk of life, living or deceased, would you desire to share a bottle of your wine with, to show what you've done?
Oh, 2 characters, Robin Williams, who passed away, and Eddie Vedder, Pearl Jam.
Together?
Together. Creating something for me. Yeah.
I feel like you were prepared for that. That came so quickly. Wow. So complete the sentence for me. A table without wine is like?
A swimming pool without water.
And ties in because you're a swimmer. See, I got it.
Yeah, man.
Scott, I have a question for you, because we talked earlier about vintage variation, and you talked about, sort of the rough go that California has seen in the last few years relative to, the last few decades. And I'm curious, when you look at that, you think we'll still be making and drinking wine in 300 years or more?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. With, climatic warming is here. It's real, man. There's same vineyards or same areas that I've been harvesting and making wine from for several years. And they're getting riper sooner. The highs are higher and the lows are lower. It's for real. So 300 years, we might be making wine in Alaska. I don't know. It's something I think we all need to really, really, in our generation, for the next generation and the next and the next, start to look at, and how can we slow things down. I'm not sure we can reverse them, but we got to slow things down.
Mm-hmm. So if you unfortunately couldn't slow it down and you were sent to a deserted island, what 3 wines would you take with you?
Well, that's another interesting question. If you're on a desert island, and who is going to actually, who are you going to allow on the boat? You want a fermenter, because a fermenting guy can ferment friggin' anything.
No, you get 3 wines, and you don't have to worry about refrigeration or ice or temperature outside. What 3 wines would be your last 3 wines if you had to pick?
My benchmark: Salon, Champagne. Mm-hmm. Maybe just 3 bottles of that. Okay, if we couldn't have 3, I'd have to have 3 different ones. God, you're pressing it. Then I would like, let's see, what is the Napa? There's some great stuff from the Tokelon vineyard, Schrader and et cetera. That's pretty cool, but out of my price bracket.
It's your island, so you can take whatever you want. You're taking Salon after all.
Yeah, things are looking up. I would take probably a really, really good French Burgundy, Rumini Conti, something like that. And then I dig, Cali Syrah, or New World Syrah, Radio Quattro, or actually, Schaefer makes a really good Syrah out of Napa, Relentless.
There we go. See, you did it in the end. Well, it's time now. I've got one more question, one more challenge for you, and that is to pair wine with music. The game we play here at the end of Wine Soundtrack every time. It's an opportunity to talk about some of your specific wines, and also what kind of music it makes you think of, what you'd want to listen to, and then maybe we'll all try it at home. So I'm going to start with your Rumpus 2020 Sauvignon Blanc. You said these are your value wines, your entry-level wines, the Rumpus wines. So what about this wine?
Yeah, that's the wine that gets things moving So that might be poolside. It's my mom's favorite wine. So as we come into the party, there's a bunch of kids running around, jumping in the pool. They're rambunctious. We'd have to turn it up a notch. Maybe something from the Beastie Boys, Sabotage. You guys know that one?
And this is a Sauvignon Blanc that is not New Zealand style. So is it a little more Sancerre-like? How would you describe it?
Scotty P style. I would think, kind of a California, definitely New World. It's, again, unctuous. It has weight on the palate. It's about 8%. Barrel fermented. It's aged sur lie for about 5 months. So there's weight, texture, lots of ripe melons. Picked over 2 different picking dates. It's a bigger style. Yeah.
Okay. What about your rocks? The Sonoma rocks and Cabernet?
Let's see, music. Okay, that's kind of getting into the... so now, in this imaginary barbecue, we went from Sauvignon Blanc. We missed Chardonnay, by the way.
Well, maybe we'll come back to it.
Okay, so then this is kind of... the kids are probably into doing the video game thing, so we're outside. It's still warm. We've had a nice meal, or maybe we might be in the middle of the Argentina asado. God, I had asado every day last week. It's wonderful. Something kind of brooding, maybe. One of my favorite artists is Thievery Corporation. And there's a great track called Sweet Tides that I really dig. Go to Spotify and do Thievery Corporation. They play in Northern Cali quite a bit.
So that goes with the Cabernet from Rox, but then let's go down south to Rocks of the Andes and a quintessential Argentine grape, Malbec.
Yeah, that might... okay, I have a good artist there. I was listening to it a little bit earlier today. And I just turned my buddies, my comandantes in Argentina to this last week, was... I just got... Oh, yeah. A guy who also lives in Oakland. I think he's from the East Coast, but from Oakland, called Citizen Cope. Kind of a balladeer, singer, songwriter. We'll tour solo, and we'll also tour with a band. But he's got some nice riffs, good sense of humor, optimism. Doesn't like to be controlled. So I think that kind of puts the Argentine thing all wrapped up.
And then we'll finish with your SP drummer wine, and we'll go back to Chardonnay, your quintessential California Chardonnay.
God, you almost have it there, Allison. When I'm in the UK, it's like I love the way the women say Chardonnay. That's why I make it. Yes, let's see. So I have to go to not necessarily a new genre, but it would have to be something, kind of mellow, nice melody. What have I been listening to? Drawing a blank here. Again, moving to the Thievery Corporation, and trying to think of who was at Bottle Rock or who's going to be there. There's kind of a cool Mexican band called Kinky that has some great riffs and some great rhythms. And that might because Chardonnay would be our second wine, Sauvignon Blanc, then Chardonnay, and then Rox Cabernet, and then the Andes. So we're still a little rambunctious. Kids are still running around. So try the band Kinky. You have some young Mexican guys, I think out of Mexico City, that have some great moves.
Cool. Okay, well, there you go. We now have a new playlist. So, Scott, my final question for the day is, what wine region in the world, I know you just got back from Argentina and you split your time between there and here, but what wine region in the world is at the top of your bucket list to explore?
Interesting, because we had this round-robin discussion literally Friday night when I was in Mendoza, Argentina, and it's where would you like to make wine? Or your number one wine destination? We all were thinking, and prima donnas were like Burgundy and then Champagne and blah, blah, blah. But I think kind of the Northern Rhone, because it's rugged. I dig Syrah. Avignon, that's not Northern Rhone, but it's more of the Southern Rhone. That's where I would like to have a project.
That's to make wine. What about to visit? Same thing?
I've already been there a couple of times, but yeah, I love visiting there. Yeah, same thing.
Well, so if somebody wanted to visit you or find your wines, part 2 of this question is, how can they find your wines?
So most of my wines are available through nakedwines.com, direct to consumer. I folded my 2 brands into their portfolio in 2015, so 8 years ago. So I would strongly suggest that you go to nakedwines.com, check it out, look up Scott Peterson. You can see me, a couple podcasts, and for what that is. And then if you're ever in Northern California, we do have a couple cooperative wineries. One is in Kenwood, one is in the southern part of Napa. Contact anybody or email me directly. If you're in town, if I'm in town, I can meet up. We can taste some wines in the barrels, hang out, poolside maybe. Yeah, I'm around Northern California.
Sounds good. So if you head up to Sonoma and you want some unctuous, big, what does ROC stand for again?
Retro, obsessive, and extractive.
Yeah. So if you want some rocks, then find Scott Peterson, check out nakedwines.com, look him up, and check out his wines. We've got Rox of the Andes, Rumpus, and S.P. Drummer. So, Scott, thank you for joining us on Wine Soundtrack. I hope you had a little bit of fun.
Thank you so much, Allison. What a pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to a new episode of Wine Soundtrack USA. For details and updates, visit our website, winesoundtrack.com.